things, huh? Actually, I think everybody would agree that right now insurance is at the top of everybody's mind, probably the number one issue as I travel around the state. That's what people are interested in. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, this is my second term, of course, chairman of the House Insurance Committee. I am from Pollock in Grant Parish, which is just north of Alexandria, the heart of the state. My district, District 22, includes all of Grant, parts of Natchitoches and LaSalle Parish, and so if you can visualize this, I like to say it goes from Cane River in Natchitoches to Catahoula Lake in LaSalle Parish. Grant Parish, my home, is the only parish in the state without a stoplight. If you can imagine that, very, very rural. Over a third of the state is Kisatchie National Forest, so we're proud of that. I'd encourage you, if you ever get a chance, come see us in Grant Parish. I think the most beautiful parish in the state. And as Leah mentioned, I do have some bills of my own that I'd be happy to talk about, but really for me, what I'd like to talk about is the package of insurance reform, legal reform bills that the House of Representatives has put together, and for the most part, passed just about every one of those bills on to the Senate. And this whole effort started several months ago. Coming out of regular session last year, we felt like we'd made tremendous progress when it comes to property insurance reforms, but there was work left to be done when it comes to automobile insurance. Here in Louisiana, we're the most unaffordable state in the nation for auto insurance. You can drive to Texas or Mississippi or Arkansas, sometimes cut your rates in half. If you're talking commercial policies, you can cut them even more than that, and that's unacceptable. We can understand why Louisiana might be higher when it comes to homeowners insurance or commercial property insurance. Really no good reasons from my perspective why we're the most unaffordable state in the nation for auto insurance. So I'd like to give credit to Speaker Philip DeVilliers. Coming out of regular session, he recognized the urgency to do something about the automobile insurance crisis, and so he put together this series of joint committee meetings that started back in July when House Insurance, Senate Insurance, House Civil Law Committee, and Senate Judiciary Committee started meeting jointly. At least on one occasion we met with all four committees, and then going forward for 7 or 8 months we had these joint committee meetings designed with one purpose in mind, and that is to determine what the underlying cost drivers of auto insurance is in Louisiana. I think we were very successful in that, and so out of these special committee meetings, the House of Representatives put together a package of bills that I think has the potential, if we can pass them collectively, to really transform our auto insurance market, to attract new insurers into the state, and to give consumers options when they're purchasing automobile insurance. Be happy to dig into some of those bills specifically, but let me tell you first what we found coming out of these special committee meetings, and it's really very, very simple what's driving the cost of auto insurance in the state. And we found that in Louisiana we are more than twice as likely to file bodily injury claims when we're involved in automobile accidents. And then to resolve those disputed bodily injury claims, we're more than 4 times as likely to litigate to resolve those disputed claims. Just to put things into perspective, in 2021 here in Louisiana, population of roughly 4.5 million people, we filed 66,000 bodily injury claims resulting from auto accidents. The state of New York, with a population of roughly 20 million, filed 60,000 claims. So just let that sink in. Alabama, with about 500,000 more people than us, filed roughly half the number of claims that we did here in Louisiana. So, look, that's the problem in a nutshell, is we've got an environment that's very lucrative when personal injury claims are filed. And if we're ever going to see any sort of downward pressure in premiums, we've got to reduce the number of claims and the payouts associated with those claims. And so the package of bills that we've put together is designed to do that. I'll say this, I am very, very proud of the group that I've worked with these past several months. Myself and Speaker Pro Tem Mike Johnson have worked with a group of about 15 freshmen, really, over the past several months. And these freshmen are special. And I think that's because they're still fresh off their elections, off their campaigns, where they had to work so hard, where they had to get out there and knock on doors, and their constituents were telling them face to face, this is the most important issue to my family. We can't afford the highest homeowners insurance in the nation. We can't afford the highest auto insurance in the nation. And so I think this group of freshmen were really energized to work as a team to put this package of bills together. And so let me touch on a few of those. And look, the whole package to me is about fairness, transparency, and common sense. And nothing in the package is extreme for the most part. Every piece of key legislation, other states are already doing it. In fact, we've seen Georgia just this year pass comprehensive tort reform. We've seen South Carolina undertake comprehensive tort reform. The state of Florida started working on this 2 or 3 years ago. They had several special sessions, and in Florida right now, they've got insurance companies coming in actually filing for rate decreases on auto insurance. Companies like Progressive, Geico, State Farm have filed for decreases in auto insurance. So a lot of the things we did simply modeled after what other states are doing. So the first bill for me, the bill that I think can probably move the needle, level the playing field more than any other piece of legislation that's been filed, is House Bill 431 by Representative Emily Chenevert. And House Bill 431 simply says, if you're at fault in an automobile accident, you can't collect. I mean, it's really as simple as that. If you're more than 51% at fault in an accident, you are not going to be entitled to collect a windfall personal injury judgment. Here in Louisiana right now, the way the system works, you can be 95% at fault in an accident, still collect a huge personal injury award. How do other states do it? Approximately 40 other states have this system that we'd like to move to, modified comparative fault, or even a more stringent system when it comes to determining fault. So again, we're not an outlier, but very, very important. House Bill 431 passed easily through House Civil Law Committee. It's been passed off the House floor, and it is heading to the Senate Judiciary Aid Committee. So after that, I would say House Bill 435 by Representative Peter Egan is a bill that I'd like to see pass, and what that bill does is it simply caps general damages, things like pain and suffering, mental anguish, anxiety. It caps those kinds of damages at $5 million per person per accident. Again, not an outlier. We see lots of other states passing these kinds of laws. Mississippi has $1 million general damages cap. The reason this legislation is so important is right now in Louisiana, there's this tremendous proliferation of nuclear verdicts. And all you have to do is open up the paper or turn on the TV or social media, and what are you seeing? You're seeing $400 million personal injury verdict in East Baton Rouge Parish, $200 million personal injury verdict in St. Landry Parish. So these nuclear verdicts are verdicts in excess of $10 million. And I like to think about headlines. Now, I'm talking to the right crowd, right? And so think about the headlines that we're seeing here in Louisiana. $400 million verdict, $200 million verdict. Fox News, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, all in the past month have had headlines that said something like this: coastal litigation may destroy the Gulf oil and gas industry. So you think about all these headlines. If I'm a businessman looking to move into the state, if I'm an insurance company looking to invest capital in Louisiana, I see those kinds of headlines, I'm going to think twice. And if you're an insurance company, how can you model for a $100 million verdict? You can't build that level of risk into your portfolio. So by capping general damages, we can bring some certainty into the process and still adequately compensate persons who are injured. So those are two very important bills that have, again, passed the House on their way to the Senate. House Bill 34 by Representative Brian Corioso. It's just about transparency when it comes to evidence that can be presented to a jury. And for me, as a conservative Republican, this is just about smaller government, about less government interference in how we operate. It's about not withholding evidence from the jury. And so what House Bill 34 would do is it would allow the jury to see the actual cost, the amount billed for medical treatments, the actual cost, what was paid for that treatment, and then it would allow the jury to hear evidence of what is a reasonable charge for that particular procedure in that particular geographic area. So again, honestly, I don't know how anyone could be opposed to that. It's all about trusting the jury, giving them all of the relevant information, and letting them make a decision based on the evidence that's been provided. This has been referred to as collateral source in the past. For me, again, it's just about transparency and evidence. My biggest concern with this particular bill is that somewhere in the process it gets tweaked or amended or watered down to where it really isn't significant in that it's still withholding information from the jury. So my concern is any legislation that would prevent the jury from hearing testimony as to the reasonableness of medical charges, not sure it's even worth passing. So keep your eye out on that, on House Bill 34. House Bill 434 by Representative Jason DeWitt. You may call it no pay, no play. I guess I kind of refer to it as play by the rules or pay up. Again, it's about fairness, and I don't know how anybody could be opposed to it. Of course, we've got a law here in Louisiana that makes mandatory the purchase of liability insurance. And so right now, if you do not have insurance and you're in an accident, you're injured as a result of the accident, you can't collect on the first $15,000 of bodily injury or the first $25,000 of property damage. This bill by Representative DeWitt would increase those limits on bodily injury excuse me, and on property damage to $100,000. So you would not be entitled to collect on the first $100,000 of bodily injury or property damage. And look, this is going to be very, very important in reducing the number of frivolous or baseless claims that are filed. So again, if you don't have insurance, if you're not playing by the rules, you should not benefit from breaking those rules. House Bill 450 by Representative Michael Mellerin, very similar legislation, was hit a roadblock in Judiciary A Committee last session, so Representative Bellerin is bringing that legislation back. So right now we operate in Louisiana under something called the Housley presumption, or what I call it is the fender bender free ride. So the Housley presumption more or less says you don't have to prove that your injury came as a result of the car accident. And so it puts the defendant right from the start at a disadvantage, in that the defendant, under the Housley presumption, has to prove that the plaintiff was not injured. All we'd like to see is, let's start out on an even playing field. So what House Bill 450 would do is repeal the Housley presumption. Y'all tell me when I'm running out of time. I could talk about this stuff forever. So a few other bills that I think are very, very important. House Bill 440 by Representative Chance Henry. Again, just a common sense transparency bill that more or less says if a plaintiff chooses, for whatever reason, not to utilize his health insurance, the defense is allowed to present that fact to the jury. So again, common sense, not sure why anybody would be opposed to that. Just basic transparency, giving the jury all of the information it needs to make good decisions. I think House Bill 436, that's my legislation that I have filed. House Bill 436 just says if you're in our country illegally, if you're an unauthorized alien and you're in an auto accident, we're not going to allow you to sue for mental anguish, anxiety, lost wages, those kinds of damages. So what we know, as I've already pointed out, is we file bodily injury claims at a much higher rate. We pay out on these bodily injury claims at a much higher rate. So anything we can do to lower the number of claims, to decrease claim payouts, it's less money insurance companies have to collect in premiums. So again, House Bill 436 simply designed to lower claims, lower payouts, and also to encourage legal immigration. Boy, we've got so many good bills. We've got House Bill 439 by Representative Troy Hebert. What this bill would do is it would limit attorney contingency fees on small claims. So we've got just a huge number of claims that are filed for minimal liability limits. So we've got very low mandatory auto liability limits here in the state, lowest in the country. And so what House Bill 439 would do is limit to 10% what attorneys can make on these very, very small claims. And it's all about consumer protection, because we don't want to see the attorney collecting more than the injured person. And so this bill by Representative Hebert is going to help with that. It's going to protect the claimant, protect the injured person, make sure that they have money sufficient to pay for their medical bills and any other expenses they have as a result of the accident. House Bill 336 by Representative Roger Wilder will, again, it's just about basic fairness. This is a bill that will prevent venue shopping. So there's a loophole in the law right now that sometimes prevents the case from being heard where the accident occurred, or where the defendant lives, or where the defendant's company is domiciled. So all this bill does is remove that loophole that sometimes allows a plaintiff to really unfairly obtain a very favorable venue where the lawsuit is heard. Representative Dennis Bamberg has filed House Bill 427. And what it does, and it just makes sense, it establishes a trust for future medical damages. So we certainly want to make sure that the injured person has a reserve of money set aside to cover future medical bills. And so what this would do is it would set aside this money based on what's awarded by the court to cover a claimant's future medical bills. So bring some certainty to the process, make sure that money is set aside for the treatment of the claimant's injuries. Representative Shinver has another bill, House Bill 432, that just brings some transparency to third-party litigation funding. She filed similar legislation last year that didn't make it through. We ended up amending one of Senator Stein's bills to incorporate some of these principles into it, but it just calls for some disclosure as to these third-party funding agreements where we may have East Coast hedge funds investing in the outcome of Louisiana personal injury lawsuits. And so, a lot of potential problems there. And so this is just a good transparency bill. We've got a few more that it's about 18 or 20 bills that I would consider part of the House's auto reform package. Every single one of them have made it off the House floor and to the Senate, with the exception of House Bill, Carver's bill that targets deceptive and unethical advertising, House Bill 667. We should hear it on the House floor this week. And then the only other bill that has not yet made it to the Senate is Representative Corioso's distracted driving bill. And so, I really think this package of bills that the House has passed is historic. And I don't think people are talking about it enough. When you look at the amount of work, the amount of research, the amount of meetings, look, we've been around the state. We've held town hall meetings, and all of these efforts have gone into putting this package of bills together. And in the first 3 weeks of session, the House of Representatives has passed with very little opposition this package of bills to the Senate. And so, look, I'm not saying our work is done in the House, but man, we have done a lot at the start of session. But again, it's the result of many, many months worth of work. I'm proud of the efforts, and look, we've just got to get these bills through the Senate and on to Governor Landry. Yes, ma'am.
All these things you've sent to the Senate, if they pass all this, the bottom line is, when should drivers be able to see a reduction in their rates? If all this passes, you mentioned other states that more companies have come in, more competition, but when should Louisiana drivers expect some relief?
Yeah, good question. So the question is, if these bills pass, when can we expect some rate relief? Very good question. And so a couple of things I want to say about that. First of all, I would say it's very, very important that everyone understand there's not one bill. There's not one bill we can pass that will lower rates. The House has put this package of bills together to work collectively. So one bill is dependent on the other. And so I'm not saying we need to pass every single bill or the conditions will not improve. There are 5 or 6 key bills in there that must pass if we're ever going to see lower rates. And the other thing I would say is it would be foolish for anyone to say even passing a whole package of bills is going to lower rates, because there's so many variables that we can't control. If we see double-digit inflation, chances are we're not going to see lower rates. So this is the metric for me. why are we last? Why are we last? I can tell you this, and I will guarantee this. If we pass this package of bills and this package of bills becomes law, we will not be the most expensive state in the nation for insurance. So right now, more of our check goes to pay auto insurance than any other state in the nation. It's just not acceptable. If we pass this package of bills, that will not be the case. And Florida passed these reforms in, I believe, 2021 and 2022. So it took 2 to 3 years for them to start seeing the results. But there's been this movement in Florida to push back on those reforms and to reverse some of the good things that have been done. I think the Florida Senate has, for the most part, stopped those efforts to kill some of the reforms that were passed, but Florida's the case model. If we can follow what Florida did, emulate those reforms, we will see the same results. I'm very confident of that. Yes, sir.
Another issue here is the injury attorneys. You drive down any interstate anywhere in the South, not just in Louisiana, you see the same billboards and the same people, and they're making a killing off it. It's probably bigger than anyone else. How do you regulate something like that?
Yeah, so the question was, we've got so many billboards. Of course, all you have to do is drive down the interstate. And so how do we regulate it? So Representative Carver does have a bill, House Bill 667, that would target those. It would target not necessarily billboards, but any sort of deceptive or unethical advertising. To be quite honest with you, I expect it to pass. I expect there to be an immediate court challenge. Who knows, honestly, when that law, if it's passed, will become effective. One moment through this whole discussion that has really stood out for me is a couple of months ago we had a town hall meeting in Pineville. Me and Representative DeWitt and Speaker Pro Tem Johnson. We had over 300 people show up, and it was one heartbreaking story after another. Single moms, widows, tow truck drivers, loggers, dirt and sand haulers. One particular logging contractor from LaSalle Parish came up there, said, I don't know what to do. We're parking trucks. I'm going to park 5 trucks this week. I'm going to lay off 10 families. The same week, I don't know if we've got somebody from the Advocate here or the Picayune, NOLA. The same week, they ran a story that 2 prominent billboard attorneys were bragging about who's spending the most money in New Orleans. $25 million apiece. So we've got billboard wars in New Orleans, and my people are losing their jobs. I don't know how we regulate that. Let's face it, we've got a cultural problem. We've got this jackpot justice mentality. I don't want to deprive anybody of their ability to make a living. I hope every attorney and every insurance executive in the state gets filthy rich. But at the end of the day, I answer to the people back home, and we've got to find solutions. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned that there are 20 plus bills on insurance reform. And as a consumer, we hear about this and we immediately start to think, okay, which of those bills, maybe all of them, maybe one of them, you said 4 or 5 of them, are needed to actually have an impact on lowering rates. So when you guys are going through, you mentioned one, you led off with one description of claimants who have no insurance, but they're still collecting money when they get hurt, which is horrible. And you hear that, and it's horrible. How many? What is? My question is, what is that total? When you guys are doing your review of these different bills that you want to get passed, do y'all quantify it as to? Can you place a dollar amount? I'm sure the insurance industry can say, last year we spent X amount of dollars on payments out to Louisiana consumer insurance residents. We don't put a dollar amount to each one of these so that the consumers, as we're going to vote on things, we can see something as simple as last year, whatever, our insurers paid out whatever, $10 billion, and this one particular bill represents $4 billion. Wow, that seems pretty big. I'm going to vote on that. Versus, I mean, we all associate a dollar amount of impact that bill, if passed, could be a part of in helping lower rates.
Yeah, so the question was, can you quantify the potential economic effect of passing one bill? And more or less is what you asked. So I'd say this, it's almost impossible to quantify the economic impact of passing one bill. For one thing, again, we need to pass them. They're going to be much more effective collectively. Now, one bill in particular that I think we can sort of get a sense for how effective it may be is House Bill 434, the No Pay, No Play bill by Representative DeWitt. And it's a little easier, I think, to quantify that because we know that our rate of uninsured drivers is about 12 or 13%, which actually we're not exceedingly high when it comes to the number of uninsured drivers. We are when it comes to underinsured drivers. So if we've got about 13% uninsured drivers and we know how many bodily injury claims there are in a year, you multiply that amount by the percentage of uninsured drivers, you expect there to be some kind of correlation there. And so then we know, what percentage of those claims would be on the minimal end. So I think that's a bill that's pretty easy to quantify, and we can look at that and say, this particular bill is going to eliminate a big chunk of claims filed by uninsured drivers. So that's one bill that I think we could get close to identifying, not exactly, but we could identify a range of claims that it would reduce. It'd be significant. Maybe 8 to 10% of the claims filed would. Let me lower that. Maybe 5% we could eliminate by passing this bill. Again, significant, but it's not going to solve our problems. So just impossible to perfectly quantify a single piece of legislation or even the whole package. But when you look at these numbers, like the fact that we're litigating at 4 times the national rate, it's so obvious we're such an outlier there that anything we can do to bring that number down, to bring the number of litigated claims down, to bring down the number of bodily injury claims that are filed, anything we can do can only have a positive impact. Yep.
You mentioned uninsured, but also underinsured. I know the state of Texas has a much higher minimum. What percentage when you add the underinsured to our 13% exists? Do you have a number for that?
Yes, don't quote me on this. I'm going off memory, but so we're at 12 or 13% uninsured, which is in line with the southern average at least. I want to say roughly 30% are underinsured, and we are probably the highest in the nation when it comes to underinsured because we have the lowest limits by far. We have the lowest limits, and the problem with that, I would love to raise our minimum limits, but if you do that, you naturally raise the cost of insurance on those minimum limit policies, and that's the people who can least afford it. So just to that's a tough nut to crack. How do we lower the number of underinsured drivers?
Right.
Liam.
So if I'm not mistaken, the whole idea here is to lower the number of claims and then also bring down those high settlements. in so doing, you would then lower the risk assessment. The insurance companies wouldn't have to factor in so much risk when they're setting these rates. Have you talked to insurance companies, and have they give you any assurances that doing these things to bring down those two, the tort reform, does that actually relay lower insurance rates?
What we know is this. Insurance companies are in the business of making money, right? Excuse me. And insurance companies are going to move into a market. They're going to invest in places where they can make money. Bottom line is, Louisiana has not been a profitable place for insurance companies over the past 10 years. Even further back than that, we're at a catastrophic state when it comes to commercial auto insurance. I just talked to a friend a couple of days ago that owns a towing business. One company. He can find one company to insure him. So I believe the free market works. I believe in capitalism. I believe in competition. If we want to see downward pressure on premiums, it's only going to happen when you can walk into your State Farm agent or Allstate, your independent agent, and say, I want you to bid on my tow truck, on my log truck, on my, in my case, on my teenage son who just turned 16. Give me a competitive quote on him, please, because right now it's not competitive. So look, we've got to have competition. We've got to allow the free market to work. We're seeing that on property. And the reforms we passed last session, probably not working as quickly as people would like to see, but we know we've had 7 or 8 companies recently licensed to do homeowners business here in the state. We've had several companies file for rate decreases on homeowners insurance, and just anecdotally, I talked to a couple of my colleagues in the House from South Louisiana, who, one of them, his homeowner rates went from $10,000 to $5,000. Another one went from $9,000 to $6,000, simply because they've got options. Because they don't have to go to Louisiana Citizens. When they go to their agent, they can get competitive quotes. And so if we're ever going to see rates go down, or if we're ever not going to be the most unaffordable state in the nation, we've got to have options. Yes, sir.
So how much on a per capita basis did the insurance companies pay out in 2024 in Louisiana versus Texas and Mississippi?
Yeah, that data is not available to my knowledge yet for 2024.
How about 23?
I don't have it in 23. So your question, what did they pay out per capita in Louisiana versus Texas? I can tell you, I mean, I've got 21. If that's the most recent data I've got. So we filed 14.3 claims per 1,000 in Louisiana, whereas you look at a state like Alabama, was about 6.5 per 1,000. So as far as the per capita amount of claims paid, which you're looking for, I don't have that, but I can tell you, in Louisiana, it is much higher than our neighbors.
Do we know what insurance companies paid in 23 or 24?
I can tell you that after the hurricanes in 2020 and 2021, insurance companies paid out $24 billion.
Why don't we know for 23 or 24 what the insurance companies paid?
It takes a little time to get that data. Look, the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, they keep all that data, and all of that it will be available.
Is it a secret? After 18 months, is it a secret what was paid in 2023 by the insurance companies in Louisiana?
I don't think that information is available in 23. It should be available for 2022. I don't have it with me, but again, I do know they paid out $24 billion in 2020 and 2021, but I'll get your number, and I'll sure be happy to get that information for you.
I don't know how you can decide where you're trying to go if you don't know where you've been.
Yeah, well, look, that's a good question. And so from 2013 to 2022, which that's to make good decisions when it comes to insurance, the sample size has to be significant enough to identify historical trends, because by identifying historical trends, you can identify future trends. So, look, it's really not a good idea for me to tell you this is information for 2020 or for 2024. So, the honest way to make evaluations is to look at a 10-year period or even further. And so, from 2013 to 2022, Louisiana was the least profitable state in the nation for property and casualty insurers by far. So property and casualty insurers between 2013 and 2022, their profitability was negative 2.5%. The only state in the nation on the negative side of that metric. For that same time span, 2013 to 2022, the loss ratio, which is another measure of how much insurance companies are paying out. The loss ratio in Louisiana, property and casualty, 75%, highest in the nation. Loss ratio homeowners, 2013 to 2022, 94.5%, highest in the nation. Personal auto, 71%, about the fourth highest in the nation. Commercial auto, 84%, second highest in the nation. So, I have no reason to skew those numbers. That's from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, 10-year time period, 2013 to 2022, property and casualty insurers in the state of Louisiana lost money. Yes, ma'am.
I have a burning question. I ask all the time with insurance because females really care about this. Singles, widows, divorcees, all pay more in insurance than males, auto insurance. And I want to know why, and why that can't, because that affects me.
Yeah, so,
Discriminatory.
and so we've passed legislation. There should be no widow's penalty. And so if you're being penalized for being a widow, you need to file a complaint with the Department of Insurance, because that should not be the case. Now, I think what insurance companies would tell you is, there's multiple factors that go into rate making. Different companies have different weights to that criteria. I can tell you I've got my daughter turned 15 Saturday. My son will turn 17 later in the month. There is without a doubt a correlation between male drivers 16 to 25 and female drivers 16 to 25. So, the idea that we would never use sex or allow insurance companies to use sex in or gender in their rate making, I would disagree with that. But again, I'm just giving my opinion. Maybe insurance companies would have different data, but personally, I would see no reason why females would ever be rated higher than males. So again, if that's something you've got a question about, if you feel like there's an appeal process, you can always file complaints with the Department of Insurance. So if that's happening, it should not be.
I just have a friend whose husband died, who just got a recent policy, and her insurance went up.
Yeah.
Because he's no longer there.
Yeah. Number one, I would ask for an explanation from the insurance company. Then I would follow up with the Department of Insurance. Yes, sir.
I'm not aware of any I'm just gonna say it personally, because I'm really involved, read the newspaper, walk the neighborhoods, talk to my, work on campaigns, been a member of this, public affairs research, etc. Did you all consider some other alternatives in our current system? For example, if I were able to just be liable for myself, for me and my insurance company, I could cut my uninsured, underinsured, and it would cut my cost by about 50%. If people are driving in from out of state right now on the interstate, they may not have insurance. If they bought gasoline, you had some tax on gasoline, maybe they would have a minimum of some insurance. Have you considered any of these other things, and instead of these 22 or 24 patches that you're now talking about to our current system?
Yeah, actually we have. And so that's actually, someone actually mentioned the idea at one of our committee meetings about maybe some sort of pool of money to help when people are involved in accidents with uninsured drivers. Can't say that we've got any legislation that would reflect that, but we do have some, I think, some really innovative bills that have been filed. I worked with Representative Rodney Schermerhorn to file a bill. I don't know the bill number off the top of my head, 328 maybe. But what this bill would do is it would require insurance companies to offer actuarially justified discounts, and this is just on the commercial side, for the installation of dash cams and telematic systems. So, you know, we do know that by making roads safer, you reduce the number of accidents. That should translate into fewer claims, lower payouts. So by incentivizing investments in dash cams and telematics, I think that's a real innovative idea. Representative Hebert also has a bill that would prevent insurance companies from penalizing customers who may have a lapse in coverage that's not their own fault. So sometimes it may be that the Office of Motor Vehicles messes up. That results in a lapse in insurance coverage. We don't think that should be held against the policyholder. So another really good idea. I've actually got a bill, House Bill 438, that says insurance companies cannot use institutional advertising expenses in rate making. And so look, if we're going to ask plaintiff attorneys to advertise ethically, I think it's only fair that we look at how insurance companies advertise as well. So this bill would say if you're running these silly little advertisements that have no informative value, no educational value, we're not going to allow you to claim that as an expense to justify raising rates. So again, a very consumer-friendly piece of legislation that should result in lower expenses.
All right, folks, I think we'll wrap it up. Well, everyone, if we can give a big round of applause for Rep. Gabe Firment and fighting the good fight. And I know a lot of us are dependent on these rate decreases, so thank you for being here.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it, Chief.